Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to do something a little different. We're not just going to learn about a concept, we're going to learn how to absolutely nail an exam question on it. And our topic? It's a true classic in economics, the J-curve effect. So here it is, the big one. A question worth 10 crucial marks. Just imagine for a second. You're in that exam hall. The clock's ticking away. You see this. What is the J-curve effect? Explain it graphically. Now, it seems simple enough, right? But trust me, getting those top marks, that takes way more than just a basic definition. It needs a solid structure, and it needs precision. So you know what? Let's build that perfect answer together, from the ground up. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to break down what the question is really asking. Then we'll build the simple story behind the J-curve. After that, we'll turn that story into a formal, structured answer. And then we'll add those little A+ details that really make it shine. We'll even peek behind the curtain and see how a grader would score this before we talk about why any of this actually matters outside the classroom. All right, let's jump right in. The first step is always understanding the question. And this one's got two really clear parts, doesn't it? Define the concept and explain it with a graph. So right off the bat, we know we've got to have a perfect mix of words and a great visual to snag all 10 of those marks. Okay, before we get all tangled up in technical terms and jargon, let's start with the story. Because honestly, the best economic ideas, they just feel intuitive, right? And the J-curve, it's really just a simple story about what happens to a country's trade balance right after a major economic event. And what's that big event? It's a currency depreciation. This is a super fundamental idea, and if you're following along in a textbook like Mankiw's Principles of Economics, you'll find this in the international trade sections. So think about it like this. Let's say the US dollar suddenly gets weaker. What does that mean? Well, for someone in, say, France, American-made stuff just got a whole lot cheaper. It's like a big sale. But for Americans, that dream trip to Paris or that German car, oof, it just got way more expensive. And it's this simple change in price that kicks off the entire J-curve effect. So this whole story unfolds in two main parts, kind of like a two-act play. Act 1, I call it the dip. And this is the weird part, the part that feels totally counterintuitive. Right after the currency gets cheaper, the country's trade situation actually gets worse. Yeah, worse. But then comes Act 2, the rise. Just give it a little time and everything starts to flip. The trade balance doesn't just recover, it actually gets better than it was before. And you can see that whole story right here on this timeline. The depreciation happens and bam, immediately you see the trade balance take a nosedive. That's the short run. It gets worse. But if you just wait, if you stick with it, you hit the long run. People's buying habits change, the volume of trade adjusts, and that line swings right back up, way past where it started. You see it now, right? It literally draws the shape of a J. Okay, so we've got the story down. We get the intuition. Now it's time to level up. Let's translate this simple story into the kind of structured academic language that's going to make examiners sit up and take notice. This is how we turn that gut feeling into a top-scoring answer. And this right here is the magic trick, the translation. Our simple idea that things get worse first, well, in economics, that's called the price effect. See, in the short run, our demand is what's called inelastic. We're creatures of habit, right? We don't change what we buy overnight, so we're still buying the same amount of imported stuff, but now it costs more. That's why the balance gets worse. But give it time. Our behavior does change, and that's the volume effect. We start buying more of our own country's cheaper exports and fewer of those expensive imports. Our demand has become elastic. We're finally responding to those new prices. So think of this as your personal checklist for writing the answer. You absolutely have to 1. Define the J-curve. 2. Explain that short-run dip, and you have to use the terms price effect and inelastic demand. 3. Explain the long-run improvement, using volume effect and elastic demand. And of course, you gotta mention that the whole thing looks like the letter J on a graph. Hit those points, and you're in great shape. Okay, following that checklist will definitely get you a good score. No doubt about it. But we're not here for good, are we? We're aiming for a perfect 10. And to get there, we need to drop in one more detail, the kind of thing that tells the grader, wow, this person really gets it. And here it is, the secret sauce, the Marshall-Lerner Condition. This is your A+ gold star detail. Why? Because when you mention this, you're showing the examiner that you know the J-curve's happy ending isn't guaranteed. It's not automatic. That upward swing only happens if the demand for both exports and imports is elastic enough in the long run. You could say it's the hitting rule that makes the whole J-curve work or not work. All right, let's switch hats for a second. Let's think like the person grading your paper. How are they actually handing out those 10 marks? Seriously, understanding the rubric is like getting a cheat sheet for how to write the perfect answer. Let's break it down. Just clearly defining the J-curve, that'll get you 2 marks. The graph itself, getting it drawn and labeled correctly, that's a big one, worth 3 marks. Then, your explanation of the short run versus the long run, another 3 marks. And that little A+ detail we talked about, the Marshall-Lerner Condition, that's the final 2 marks that separate a good answer from a great one. And guess what? The answer we just put together, it checks every single one of those boxes. But this isn't just some abstract theory you memorize for exam and then forget. The J-curve has huge, real-world consequences for governments all over the world who are trying to manage their economies. And this quote really nails it. Messing with your currency's value is a massive gamble. What the J-curve shows policymakers is that if you go down this road, you have to be prepared to go through some economic pain first. You have to survive that initial dip before you can even hope to see the benefits. It is the absolute definition of short-term pain for long-term gain. So that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. In the world we live in today, with these incredibly complex global supply chains and trade that happens at the click of a button, how predictable is the J-curve really? I mean, do those time lags and reactions still happen in the same way? It's a huge question for economists right now, and definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on this one.